Jesus, hallelujah. And now we have joining us Dr. Wayne Phillips, and we are live. We're streaming live. And, folks, I want to help everybody understand where you can go to follow along, because this is normally a presentation that is done by Dr. Wayne at various venues using, big screen projection and such like that. So it's very much driven by these images and such and slides. So in order to follow along with the presentation so that you can get the impact of this awesome research, what you can do is go to tribulation-now.org. Again, that's tribulation-now.org. And you'll notice a big black banner with a whole bunch of links right at the top of the screen. Now, at the bottom, you'll see a link there that's entitled Terry Hill. Now, click on the Terry Hill link, because when you do, you scroll down just past Terry Hill's teaching sessions, and right there is in big letters, it says Shroud of Turin, Dr. Wayne Phillips, and just below his photograph is a link. When you click on that link, it will open up a 42-slide presentation inside of a PDF, an Adobe Acrobat PDF, and you'll be able to follow along. Again, at the bottom of the black banner section, click on the Terry Hill link, scroll past her teachings. It's about halfway down the page, and there you will see Dr. Wayne and a link under his photo entitled Dr. Wayne Phillips Shroud 42 slides. Click on that. It'll open in your browser, and you can follow along. And then also for those of you who are looking at the radio show that are actually at blogtalkradio.com, I have a direct link for viewing the slides in the show description where it says to view the slideshow, click here in all capital letters. If you click here on that word, it will open up the slideshow in your browser there as well. God bless you, Dr. Wayne. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm going to turn the microphone over to you at this time and let you just go ahead and walk the listeners through this powerful research that you've done. God bless you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, John. This is quite an opportunity I have to get this message across, so I really appreciate it. So if you're looking at the slides, we're going to go through the 42 slides, which really is only a sampling of what you can find. If you're interested in what I present tonight, you can find my entire talk, which is almost an hour and a half, on Google by typing Shroud Phillips, P-H-I-L-L-I-P-S, Shroud is S-H-R-O-U-D. Or you can go to YouTube with the same Shroud Phillips, and you can find my presentations that are longer. So I've made it a little bit shorter here because of the time, and I want to leave a lot of time for you guys to ask questions after the presentation. So I'm just going to try to go through a summary of what I normally talk about in the Shroud. Now I'm a physician. I'm still working. I'm semi-retired. I'm getting a little older, but I do work half-time. I'm an allergy immunology specialist, board certified, and I'm also an internal medicine specialist, board certified physician. So I've been in practice 37 years, and I got interested in the Shroud of Turin kind of by accident in 1975, right when I started my training, by seeing a documentary on the Shroud. I'd never heard of it, so which is a little bit unusual because I went to high school in Tampa, Florida, Jesuit high school, Catholic school, and then I did my undergraduate University of Notre Dame and my medical school, University of Miami Medical School, Miami. So I had never heard of the Shroud of Turin all through my time at Jesuit and Notre Dame. So actually when I saw this supposed Catholic relic on television, I was quite upset about it because I'd wondered why my Catholic training had never brought up the Shroud of Turin, never told me about it, and here I was 31 years old and getting surprised about it back in 1975. So I was a little bit teed off, a little mad about it. But anyway, I knew I had to deal with it because now it was there in front of my face, and I had to figure out if this relic that was cherished by the Catholic Church was real. And being a doctor and a graduate of a Jesuit high school, I mean, I'm a classical skeptic on everything that doesn't have science behind it. So at that point, fortunately, I was married to my wonderful wife, Bridget, who's a 100% Christian Catholic since birth and never wavers. But I was a little bit of a doubting Thomas, so I began to look at the data on this new thing in front of my life called the Shroud of Turin, and gradually said, I need to figure this out for myself. I have to confront this because it's part of the church, and I love the church. So I attacked the self-convincing part of it as an allergist because I'm a board-certified allergist. So all of my training and knowledge, the highest level that I have of anything that I've ever accomplished is in the field of allergy. So knowing a lot about pollen, and then secondarily, just as a plain physician, knowing about blood and blood clotting, I knew I was going to be able to find out if somebody was pulling the wool over my eyes. So I looked at the data on pollen and allergy, and it took me a couple of months to be convinced that it's all real, that it cannot be faked. And just every night I would read about it, and slowly I would get a chill every night, every time I'd read some scientific facts, and I'd say, wait a minute, that can't be faked. So slowly it dawned on me that this may be the real thing. This may be a real 2,000-year-old cloth, and it may indeed have all the witnessing of the actual crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus Christ on a cloth. So finally, after about a year or so, I began believing it, and was quite taken with it, and would study and read about it for the next, 13 years or so. And then in 1988, I don't know if anyone in the audience knows, but the carbon dating was done. The Pope John Paul II gave permission to actually snip a piece of the shroud of the linen and do carbon dating. And so by that time, I was quite convinced this was all authentic. However, the carbon dating in 1988 came back as the linen was taken out of the ground in the year 1240, which is quite a lot later than the birth of Christ. So then my intellectual chiefs, my ego, everything was totally dashed by the fact that I'd been duped by the Shroud of Turin. So I gave up on it, and deep inside, I just kept hoping that it was real and kept reading all I could to find out how the carbon dating could be wrong. And finally, from 1988, it all lasted till about 2001, and I'm going to tell you that in my slide. And then in 2001, I was definitely convinced that the carbon dating is wrong. So since it's wrong, about 5-6 years ago, I got permission from the bishop in our diocese, St. Petersburg, Bishop Lynch, to give these talks. And I've been giving these PowerPoint slide talks now all over the community, radio, TV, and universities, colleges, high schools. I've given over 100 talks on this. And I'm going to give you a little taste of it. And if you want me to talk in your community, just look me up at email of Wayne, W-A-Y-N-E, Shroud, all one word, WayneShroud@yahoo.com. So here we go. So let me start with the first slide, which is a picture of our present Pope. And, of course, we have a line of succession in modern times that all the last 4 or 5 popes have all never been able to come ex cathedra and say the relic is definitely the authentic burial cloth of Christ, but on the side, in a private manner, they do venerate the shroud, they do go see it, they do touch it, and they do pray to it. So in ways that are not directly dogma of the faith of the Catholic Church, the shroud is truly believed to be real by all the remaining pontiffs. And this one, the Father now, the bishop, not the bishop, the Pope now is even more enamored than most people. Because he actually increased the speed of the exhibition of the shroud, which usually happens every 15 to 20 years. It was supposed to happen in 2025, and he loves it so much that he jumped it up to 2015. And as you can see on that slide, we have a quote from him, which says, "By means of the Holy Shroud, the unique and supreme Word of God comes to us." So this is just a sample of many of the different things the popes have said in the last 15 to 20 years about it. So if we go to the next slide, let's go right into what this is all about. Now, this is a picture that I actually took when I went to see the Shroud of Turin during its exhibition in 2015. And you can see, we'll look at some of the marks on it here to get a little orientation geographically. Now, we're going to have question and answers as soon as we go through this, so please stay tuned here because I'll answer all your questions until we run out of time. So make notes, and if you want, refer to the shroud, to the slide number, and then I can easily back up and answer any questions you have. So right now we see this photograph of the shroud as it was exhibited in 2015 with the honor guard in front of it. And if you look at it, it's a little bit hard to see the images, so I've turned up the computer contrast to make the image darker. So what you first see strikingly is a bunch of burn holes, cut out triangular figures, 4 on the top that are white and 4 on the bottom. That's actually where the Shroud of Turin was folded up in a case, and the silver case caught on fire, and some of the drips of molten silver burned holes in it. So mentally, try to erase those 8 white marks and just look at the image in the middle of the cloth. What you can see in the middle of the cloth, if you look right dead center, to the left is the facial image of a man, and then as you go from right to left from the center, you'll see chest markings, then you see 2 arms coming down. You can see some blood on a wrist. You can see blood trickling down his arm. You go further down, you see another brownish triangular stain or diamond-shaped stain. That's water that was thrown on the shroud. You can see his knees, and you can see down to the area of the feet. Now, if you start at the center of the shroud image and look to the right, the first groupings of blood there are many 18 to 20 puncture marks on the back of the scalp with blood pouring forth. And I have much better close-ups I'm going to show you later. And then going down to the right, or moving to the left to right, you can see scourge marks and blood marks all over his back. You can see that he is nude. You can see his knees are bent up. I'll show you that better. And at the far right, you can see blood coming out of his feet. So let's go to picture number 3. Now, this shroud is 13 feet long and 36, 37 inches wide, which is kind of interesting because it's exactly the time of the Palestinian measurement of the cubit. So it's 4 cubits by 2 cubits, 14 feet by 3 feet. Now, what the image was made of, if you can just look at the picture now of the shroud one more time and look at the back image on the right. So in your mind, think that this shroud is laid out on some type of hard surface, and the body is then laid on the shroud. So if the body is laid face up on the shroud, you can see that the impression of the body is going to be the back of the head, the back, and the buttocks and the legs. Then on the left side, the shroud, then the cloth is furled over or brought over so that the front image then is generated by the cloth being furled over and covering the body from the front side. So between the head image on the left, the face, and the back of the head, there's an empty space, and that is the empty space that represents the middle of the head. So the body was placed inside the shroud, and the shroud was folded over, and then it was just left there loosely. Now, this type of burial is typical for the Jewish burial rites of the year 0, around that time, 0 to 30. And the blood, all the blood at any type of serious criminal event and gore and all the ugly parts of a dying, bleeding situation, according to the Jewish faith, had to be encapsulated inside the burial materials. So none of the blood was left to come out of that material. So that's why the images of the shroud and the blood are so heavy with blood and correspond so nicely to each other, which we're going to get into. All right, so before we get into the details of the shroud, let me give you a little quick summary of what we think about where it's been. So if you go to slide number 3, you'll see in yellow evidence of where we think it has been from the year 30 all the way to 1355. Now, unfortunately, documentation is not really possible here. First of all, if you have a graven image, the Jews of the time of 30 to 35 would not want to have a graven image being shown to the public. And also, they wouldn't want the Romans and the Jews at the time to persecute them or kill them because they had evidence of their connection to the crucified, lawless Jesus Christ. So that was kept under wraps there pretty safely and not shown to the public. And around 70 A.D., the Romans went into a real occupational war with the citizens of Jerusalem, and so the theory then is that the shroud was taken out of town on a natural trade route to Edessa, Turkey, which now is the city of Urfa, U-R-F-A, in Turkey. And there's evidence, which I'm going to show you, that the evidence that the Shroud of Turin, or a cloth just like it, was in that area from 30 to 944. Then in 944, the Constantinople kings, who were under the wife of the mother of one of the kings, Helen, she had been gathering up a lot of the relics of the crucifixion, the true cross, which is kind of hard to prove it was a true cross. But anyway, she had given all these relics, brought them back to Constantinople, and they were in their possession. But the king of Constantinople, after a few generations from Helen, wanted more of the relics, and he heard of the Shroud of Turin, the burial cloth of Christ, being in Edessa, Turkey. So in 944, at the height of the power and richness of Constantinople, which at that point was way surpassing Rome, they demanded from Edessa, which then was a Muslim town, they would take over the town and slaughter everyone in Edessa if they didn't give over the shroud. So, of course, the Muslims were weak at that time, and they gave over the shroud. So then the shroud makes its way to Constantinople and is in that possession of the people there from 944 to 1204. So then it goes on by way of Athens. We think the Knights Templar, who looted the city at the second of taking over Constantinople, trying to save it from the Muslim population, the Crusade, the Second Crusade, and the Knights Templar had in its possession from 1204 to 1355. Then we get into the white part of this slide, and you can see the actual documentation of 1355 when it was shown to hundreds of thousands of people in Lille, France, and then later in Chambéry, and then later moved to Turin, Italy in 1578. So that's a little quick history. So during this time, the naysayers on the authenticity of the shroud would always say nobody ever described in the literature a 13-foot, 14-foot long cloth, but at that time, the theory then is that the cloth was folded over and over on itself, so it was double folded 4 times. So as you can see in slide number 4, there's a black box around the head. And you can see actually the details now of the shroud image a little better. So we think in the recorded history then in Edessa there was a image of a man's head put into a picture frame on a landscape-sized picture frame. It was called the Image of Edessa. So it's our theory then, and some of the great scientists of the Shroud of Turin. I'm not a great scientist, I'm just a communicator. And we think that represents evidence that the shroud was indeed in Edessa, Turkey. So let's go on, and we'll look in some more details. I'm going to show you a lot of details on the body, on the shroud. But this is what you're looking at now in slide number 4 is not a great photograph. It's taken in 1898 by Secondo Pia. I'm going to show you a 1931 photograph, and then we're going to see a lot more detail. So here we go. Here's a documentation on slide number 5 of the face of the image of the shroud. In 1898, the first picture ever was taken. Secondo Pia was an amateur photographer in Turin, Italy, and he takes the photograph, and as you can see, what he had in his possession then was the appearance of a photographic negative. As anyone over 35 would realize, we used to take your film into the drugstore to get developed. You would see that the background was light in color, and the face and head image was dark. So the image in this situation, when the man in the picture has a dark face and the background is light, that's all the characteristics of a photographic negative. So this proves that the Shroud of Turin, if it was faked and done by an artist, the artist would have to already appreciate 700 years before the development of, if it was a fake from 1200, 600 to 700 years before the development of photography, he would have to know the concept of a photographic negative. So he would paint this fake shroud in the photographic negative. However, when Secondo Pia got to the lab, go to slide number 6, and he made a negative of a negative, what he actually then saw for the first time in history was a positive image of the man of the shroud. And this is, of course, much more impressive if you compare slide 5's face to slide 6. You can see that the face jumps out in detail. So let's take a minute and look at this. Remember, put down your questions to have the question and answer session. So looking at the image, you can see how the owl-type eyes are set back. You can appreciate swollen cheek on the right. You can see the mustache appearance. You can see the beard with irritation like it's been plugged. You can see rows of teeth. You can see blood pouring down the forehead and a lot of long, long hair. So the details here are just quite striking. And we're going to talk about now that actually in modern times we actually know what the cloth went to chemically and scientifically to have an image on it. However, of course, we don't know what created the power or the energy to affect the cloth. So if you look now at slide number 7, you can see a massively more detailed picture of the man of the shroud. So let's look at this closely. So as I mentioned, you can see the beard, the mustache, the long hair. But look at the fact that this man has no ears. The image has no ears, and the image has no cheeks. We're going to explain that later because that also makes it easier to believe that this is authentic, because why would an artist in the year 1240 do such a fake, and why would he leave ears off of Jesus Christ, God Almighty, and give it to the bishop and be all excited about it? You think he would be in trouble with the bishop for using such a rude, incomplete painting. So this makes it a little bit more believable that it's so strange, the image of the real Shroud of Turin, that how could it be fake? So if we go down now, you can see the scourge marks on his chest. You can see the triangular water stain in the shape of a diamond right in the middle of his chest and abdomen. You can see then his right arm and his left arm, which interestingly, because it's a photographic negative, you actually are looking at a man as if you were going to shake his hand. So his right arm is actually his right arm, and what you're looking at on the left arm and the left wrist is blood coming out of the wrist, not the palm of the hand. We're going to talk about the details the shroud shows us that differ somewhat from the artist perception and the paintings of Jesus we see now and the crucifix we have now. So basically, just a little preview, the Shroud of Turin shows evidence that the nail never went in the palm of the hand, it went into the wrist of the hand. So what you can see now is the left arm with blood flowing down the arm and blood coming out of the wrist. And you can appreciate two lines of blood, an upper line going horizontal and a lower one. And we think that represents the movement on the cross that Jesus, the man of the shroud, had to do to push up on the nails to take a breath. So as he would push up to breathe out, that the blood would trickle one direction, and as he would come down to relax, to exhale, the blood would trickle a little bit off at a different angle. So that is pretty interesting that a faker from the Middle Ages would know so many details of science. On the right, you have blood flowing down his right arm in a typical trickle formation from an angle of an arm that's exactly at a 45-degree angle up in the air, as if his wrists were nailed to a piece of wood above his head. So the angle of flow by many pathologists has been looked at through the last 30, 40 years, and they all agree that the gravity flow of blood definitely agrees with the science of blood flow. If you look back at the center of his chest, at that diamond-shaped stain, on the left side you can see a very white stain, which represents blood coming out of the right side of his chest. So this figures quite nicely also to the spear thrust into the side of around 6th or 7th not vertebrae, but intercostal muscles of the man of the shroud. Now, if we go to slide number 8, we have more of a close-up, and you can see a little bit better the detail that it's kind of strange that he has no cheeks and no ears. So let's go further on now to slide number 9. Slide number 9 is a 1931 picture as the front was. This is the back of the man of the shroud, and you can see tremendous detail. You can see long hair. You can see the shape of a ponytail that was the standard, very common hairstyle of the Jewish men of the year first century. You can see the scalp blood in much more detail, where a very compatible crown of thorns would be making many injuries. You can see scourge marks all over his back and buttocks and legs, which if are counted, there'd be over 150 scourge marks. And then very interestingly, a little bit down on the left, I'm pointing to 4 burn holes that are kind of an upside-down L in a backward shape. And those burn holes have been in drawings that are back about 1,000 years old, way before the Chambéry fire put those white triangles in. And those burn holes are in artist perception paintings that are in the Bible of a town in Budapest called Pray, P-R-A-Y, the Pray manuscript. And in that Bible, on one of the covers, is a painting of the resurrection and a picture of the shroud from an artist's perception. And lo and behold, on this 1100 painting, this painting created in 1100, are those L-shaped burn holes in reverse. So it's kind of uncanny that a painter in 1100 would make that up out of the clear blue sky. So that kind of proves that the painter was looking at the Shroud of Turin when he actually saw these burn holes. We go further down the image. We can see, you get the feeling that his knees are drawn up. His knees were definitely drawn up in a frozen position because he died on the cross and was there almost 2 hours after death. The rigor mortis definitely set in 2 hours. Now, when a man is horrible way is tortured and bleeding internally, the onset of rigor mortis after death is going to be much quicker. So it set in while he was on the cross, and he was in a frozen position with his feet flat on the cross, as you can see at the bottom. So the way to get a feeling for how to judge this image is pretend that this image is a man lying on a glass coffee table, and you're under the glass coffee table looking up. So you can see there's indentation of the shoulders on the pressure of the cross piece of the shroud. You can see there's pressure on the buttocks because he's pushing on the rock formation that the cloth is sitting on. So all the weight position points of the man of the shroud lying on the shroud where gravity is pushing, because he's, example, sitting on a coffee table, you can see there's effect of gravity. And then you can also see, because his knees are bent, the bottom of his feet are flat to the shroud or flat to the, quote, glass table, with blood rolling out of the right foot and ankle onto the shroud. So we'll go on to slide number 10, and we have a close-up now. So you can see even better the 18 to 20 holes where bleeding sites are seen on the scalp, and a better shot of the long hair and ponytail, and a much better shot of those scourge marks. And they are in the shape, if you can look closely, you can see the shape of dumbbells. So those dumbbells completely agree with the size and shape of the Roman flagrum. The Roman flagrum at that time was an instrument of torture, and you can see the details there where all the scourge marks took place. Now, if you look a little further down at his waistline, across that you can see what looks like horizontal flowing blood or maybe blood-water mixture. So this, of course, is coming down from the right side of his chest, because remember, he's sitting on lying on a glass table, so gravity is bringing that fluid towards you, and it's pooling on the lower part of his back, and you can see it across the back at that point. All right, now let's go into the 21st century. So now we have interest developed across the world because of the 1898 and 1931 photographs that the Shroud of Turin is maybe the burial cloth of Christ. Now, something happens in 1978 when Dr. Jackson, a professor of physics at the United States Air Force Academy, has an interest in the shroud. So he takes the original natural light photo. Let's see if I have it here. No, but you saw it earlier, and he takes that natural light photo, which is a photographic negative, and he puts it under a machine called the VP8 image analyzer. And that image analyzer had been invented by NASA and the people that work with NASA, the Sandia Corporation. And that image analyzer was put on our satellites back in the early days of NASA when satellites would go around the moon. So that satellite would pick up recorded signals and pictures from the moon, and the information would be encoded into the VP8 image analyzer, and the VP8 would then decide how tall a mountain was or how deep a valley was, and gave us a 3D impression of the surface of the moon. So Dr. Jackson knew this, and I'm not quite sure what gave him the idea. I did ask him one time in person about it, and his answer, of course, as a physics professor, was over my head. I said, all I could say is thank you very much. But anyway, when he put the image of the 1898 or the 1931 picture under the VP8 image analyzer, the image of Christ, the face itself, showed a 3D effect. So this was over the top impressive, and the whole world at that point was in shock that this two-dimensional black and white image that they had seen since 1898, 1931, had now in the 21st century, because of the analyzer, showed that it had encoded in it information that no other two-dimensional picture ever in history had, and this picture, or this fake drawing, had 3D encoded information. So it became even more incredulous that this drawing could be a fake, because again, in the year 1200, how would anyone encode 3D information in such an image, knowing that we would invent in the year 1978, 1978, the VP8 image analyzer. So again, that shows you this just really is not an accident. So with that information that the shroud then had 3D, the Vatican and John Paul II were quite encouraged that America had really reached a super high level of scientific abilities, and they had the courage then to let America form a team of scientists, and 90% were from America, and they formed a team, and Pope John Paul II gave them permission to come over to the city of Turin and actually physically touch and do experiments at the height of the science of 1978 that was never done before. So these scientists that came over, there in slide number 12, you can see the full-length 3D image that was seen. So these scientists that came over were representing the highest level of American achievement. These were the scientists from Los Alamos, which is kind of ironic. The developers of the atomic bomb are now looking on the image of the Shroud of Turin. But the scientists came from there. They came from Lockheed. They came from IBM. They came from the Jet Propulsion Lab. They came from Brooks Institute. They represented all types of disciplines, nuclear physics, chemistry, radiology, botany, history, textiles, medicine, mathematics, archaeology, pathology, photography, geology. All those scientists are represented, and those four scientists with some Italians came together to form the STIRP team of 1978, Shroud of Turin Research Project Team. Now, just for a little side interest, these were not fanatical religious believers. These were pure scientists, and let me just tell you the interesting breakdown of the 40 people. 3 were raised Catholic, 34 were raised Protestant, and 3 were raised Jewish. That's a member of the team, 3 Jewish members. Of that, their personal beliefs in heaven and the Almighty, 38 out of 40 were absolute agnostics that were not sure, pure scientists that had become agnostics in probably their scientific training, as all smart aleck scientists do. Excuse me for the prejudice. But 2 were believers. So when they went to see the Shroud of Turin and do their scientific experiments on it, they did not have a preconceived notion that the shroud was authentic. In fact, almost everyone believed the shroud was a fake, it was a painting, and their job was to expose that fake to the world. So they brought with them $2.5 million worth of equipment, 80 crates of equipment. They were allowed to work on the shroud for 5 24-hour days, and every single man to the letter, not one person disagreed when they left and finished their experiments. Not one believed the shroud was a fake. They could not come up with any evidence that the shroud was fake. And I'm going to give you some details on why they could say that. Now, could they, as honest scientists, say 100% scientifically the shroud was real, that it was the burial cloth of Christ? Of course not. To do that, they would have to have a DNA match of the blood in the shroud, which they took samples, with the blood of the living Jesus Christ. And I know about you, but I don't think he's going to materialize in a lab chair to take a sample. So an honest, true, high-level scientist would never be able to say the Shroud of Turin is 100% authentic until the DNA match is in. So in my belief, that I would be able to say it's 99% proven scientifically to be authentic. And I'm going to continue on to show you some of the ways that I believe that. So we'll move into then some of the data they found. So when they got back to America, they looked at the blood, and they looked at actual red blood cells from Jesus Christ, or the man of the shroud, we'll call him to sound a little less prejudiced. And they studied that blood and found it to be AB positive. No, not positive, not our H factor, AB. And also other factors in blood that probably you're not aware of. It's called the MNS system. It's a different way of looking at blood, and all primates, which of course the human being is one of the primates, the S system, the S letter of MNS, is not found in any primate except human beings. So this blood had M and N, but it had also S. So that makes it distinguished as a human being with blood type AB. Also identified on white blood cells were chromosomes, and those chromosomes did show the X and Y chromosome of the male and female contribution from the parents. The DNA, the nuclear DNA, was degraded. It was only in pieces and snips, so it was too old. Nothing's been found of that yet, but there are overtures to get more samples and be allowed to go back and look at the shroud again, so we're hoping we'll get a chance. And also there's been a lot of development since 1978 in a different type of DNA called mitochondrial DNA, which is not in the nucleus of the cell, but it's in the energy-producing mitochondria, and represents, interestingly, only the mother's genetic makeup. And that DNA is much easier to find in ancient cloth and to make sense of in complete strands. So the hope is if we ever get a chance to go back and look at the shroud and touch it and take more samples, that we'll be able to look at mitochondrial DNA. All right, so let's take you forward now on how the Shroud of Turin team proved that the Shroud of Turin is not a painting, how they reached those conclusions. So first of all, it was simple. They used a light microscope. And if you see in slide number 14, you can see that the large bands going from upper left to lower right are threads, or fibers, F-I-B-E-R-S, and the little threads that are kind of randomly popping out are fibrils, F-I-B-R-I-L-S. So every fiber is made out of 150 to 200 fibrils. So that's how close this microscope is looking. And as you can see, there's no paint, there's no dye, there's no pigment, there's nothing on those little fibrils on the very surface. So the surface of the shroud does not have paint or dyes or pigments, but still presents an image. And we'll show you how we know how that image happened. So microscopy showed no paint. The next point is the blood sites, this is the forehead blood, was then shown with a fluorescent light that the Stirp team took with them to show serum stains. If the white part, if you look at the blood stain in the middle, the dark center is the red blood cells, and the white part is serum. So when blood dries, the clot forms and shrinks. The red blood cell area shrinks and leaves a stain on the cloth that is not visible to the human eye. So if you have a man trying to fake this and put blood on the shroud, an artist, I would sure like to know how he knew that the people of the 21st century would be looking at this with fluorescent light and knowing that he had to include in his picture serum stains that he couldn't even see himself. So that was all quite an artist's accomplishment beyond the realm of human information. So we look at the next slide, 16. We can see a suggestion that there is a fractured nose with it being deviated to the left and right, and a little better shot on a massive swollen cheek that goes totally well with the Bible of the beating that the man of the shroud received the night before his crucifixion. You also can see more blood in the hair. So if we continue on into slide 17, we get a nice appreciation of what I was alluding to before, the Roman flagrum. The Roman flagrum being the leather strap with the barbell of metal on the end, probably lead, and all the shroud lashes marks and digging into the skin. So the movie, the Passion of the Christ, was quite accurate with its data of the very gory scourging scenes. Move on down to slide number 18. Now, this particular fact shown to us by the Shroud of Turin is one of the most convincing things for me as a doctor to make me think this is a believable, real, authentic witness to the resurrection. If I spent my whole life looking at crucifixion pictures and the crown of thorns of always part of it and all the artist's perceptions, what makes this believable that the man who created this Shroud of Turin image, which was God himself, he happened to disagree with the human being's belief of the crown of thorns. So the crown of thorns, if you think about it logically, you have these burly Roman nasty soldiers belittling a person, beating a person. Are they going to take the time to go out and get a thorn bush and do some basket weaving into a pretty little crown and shape it up nice and stick it on his head? No. What they're more likely going to do is get a big hunk of weed thorn bush, and they're going to smack it on his head, hit it with a 2x4, and you're going to have bleeding sites all over. So what does the Shroud of Turin shows? It shows needle marks or point bleeding sites all over the back of the head, the top of the head, the front of the head, way more surface area than a simple crown. Now, what's interesting is there exists in Palestine a plant, a thorn plant. And me as an allergist can tell you as an expert on pollen, this plant grows in desert areas near Palestine, and this is corroborated by an Austrian paleontologist, which is an expert on pollen, and also a Jewish from the Hebrew University in Jerusalem itself. They both agree that the pollen of Gundelia terniforte, which is a thorn bush, is all over the shroud in the area of the image of the head. So the highest concentration of pollen of Gundelia terniforte just happens to be near his hair, if that makes a little interesting fact for you. So the cap of thorns being the way the image was created by reality is much more believable than a crown of thorns to me. And here is a depiction in the Museum of Turin of what they would think the actual crown of thorns or cap of thorns might have looked like. More like a thrown together, quickly put together Gundelia terniforte. Now on the next slide, which would be slide number 20, you can see the back and the ponytail, but you can get an impression on the upper right that the direction of lacerations from the scourging seems to take a different course and different direction, almost horizontal. This is thought by some of our pathologists to be because a board or an object, heavy object, was moving across the back, left to right, with constant motion, and was doing a rubbing mechanism or an abrasion added on top to scourge marks or holes in the through and through full thickness skin. This we think is the patabolum of the cross. So we think these are signs of friction abrasion, also done by this fake middle-aged Superman who could add all this forethought that only 21st scientists can figure out. Now, The crowning coup de grace that this could not be done by the man of the mental image is what I'm about to tell you. So during all our lifetimes, we've seen the nails in depictions of the cross, as I mentioned before, come out of the palms of the hands. Well, this is not possible. The Shroud of Turin shows that the image proves that the nail had to be put in the wrist. Now, back in 1936, Dr. Barbet had actually, because it was 1936, got a hold of some cadavers and hung those cadavers on a cross. He did not use any support but nails. He put the nails into the palm of his hand, and of course, in a few seconds and minutes, the whole cadaver fell off the cross. Because if you look at your own hand, you can see from the palm of the hand to the fingers, there's only flesh there. And that does not have the power to hold up 80, 90 pounds on each hand. So the nail, just common sense would say, and of course science backs it up, had to be into a bony structure to hold up a 170, 180-pound person. So Barbet proved that that had to be a nail into the wrist bone. And the Shroud completely agrees with that. This area, if you look at the image on the left of slide number 21, you can see, as I mentioned, the two blood flow directions from the effort to breathe and the changing position of the body. But you can also, it's in the wrist. You look further down to the right, you can see the metacarpal bones and the carpals, which really make it look like extremely long fingers. But remember, you're looking at the possession of the palm of the hand bones, the metacarpals, and extending into phalanges or the nerve of the fingers, which make it look steadily. So, is everyone still there? I hope. Okay. I'm going to pretend you are.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, good. So
good.
Now, here's what happened. If you look at the image of the hand, you can see my arrows pointing to the fact that this image has no thumb. So the man of the Shroud has no thumbs. So again, if you look at the medieval faker, why in heavens would he ever draw a picture trying to look like Jesus Christ crucifixion with no thumbs? How would he know that a nail driven into the wrist would bisect the median nerve that feeds the muscle control of the thumb and make the thumb go into spasm? So when the nail went into the median nerve, into the wrist, it hit that nerve, and the thumb went into spasm, and you can curl your own thumb into the palm of your hand, and you can see, if you look now at the back of your hand, that your thumb has disappeared. So when the image came off the body to the resurrection, at the moment of resurrection, into the cloth, you can see no thumbs. So the other overwhelming, convincing thing, this is not a fake, is a man of the Shroud has no thumbs. Then we look at slide 22, and we can see the spear going into the 6th, 7th vertebrae into what we call the pleural space from the right side. And when you put a spear into the pleural space of a person that has died 2 hours before, you now have blood settling out. So if you take blood out of a human being and put it into a test tube, and the test tube sits there for 2 hours, all the red blood cells will sink to the bottom, and all the plasma, which is not serum, it hasn't been air exposed, the plasma will be at the top. So in this cavity of the pleural space of the man of the Shroud on the cross, after 2 hours, all his red blood cells settled to the bottom, and the clear liquid was on the top. So then you can see on the Shroud itself, watered down blood appearing in the image. So we go now to slide 23, and we have the bottom of the feet and the blood coming out of the image now from the backside image. Slide 24 is when we finally get into, after all our information, over 100 scientific facts, authenticity of the Shroud, the date of the carbon dating done in 1988 when they said the Shroud was brought from the ground at 1260 to 1390. And you can see the C14 lab people look pretty happy about the fact that they're so smart that the Shroud of Turin is a fake. So this was the theory then, and the studies on the Shroud from 1988 to 2001 completely stopped. All the scientists gave up. And John, my phone is blinking. I hope it's not going to run out of battery power. If not, you'll have to call me on my other phone, but let's try to keep going. So in 2001, a nurse, you can see on slide 25 by the name of Sue Benford, had some kind of premonition that she had a theory on how the image of the shroud was not a fake and how the carbon dating was an accident and a mistake. So she had that theory, Sue Benford, and her husband, Joe Marino, was also a fan of the shroud. So they put this theory together and they published it, and I'm going to go through that whole thing. So here is our whole theory on why the Shroud of Turin's carbon-14 dating was an error, and this is now accepted by the vast majority of shroud scientists to be accurate. So let's go over this. So let's do the background. So unfortunately, an international protocol that was developed before the carbon dating of 1987 was done by scientists from all over the world, NSERP scientists, and there was supposed to be 6 different sample sites, and they were supposed to have 6 labs. Now, the man with the arrow, unfortunately, I'm not going to hurt his feelings. He died about 8 years ago, but he is a professor of anatomy and physics in Turin, Italy, a local Italian professor, and I think my personal opinion is he had his nose out of joint a little when the American team swooped into town in 1978 and took over. So anyway, he overruled the international protocol to take 6 sample sites, smaller than a postage stamp, from the shroud, and he prevailed and only 1 sample site was taken. And you can see this is the actual taking of the sample and all the people witnessing it. So unfortunately, this sample site was not a pure sample of the linen shroud. It contained over 2/3, and we're going to show you and prove that, of a cotton patch. So the cotton patch would have been easily to have been put on a disturbed or destroyed area somewhere in the 14th to 15th century, because the sample site was taken from the upper left corner where a typical cleric would be holding the shroud on his public exhibitions. So easily damage could have happened to that upper corner, and there could have easily been a repair. So this is a close-up now, a microscopic close-up of the linen sample, the carbon-14 sample itself. And I put that artificial yellow line in the middle. So if you look at the threading of the linen, the original shroud linen, you get the impression that those are very thick white tufts there with very narrow little alleys running diagonally. And that would be real linen. And on the right, you get the impression of kind of beat-up, moth-eaten looking tufts with very deep alleys. And I hope you can appreciate that on the slide, because it shows you what cotton and the linen look like side by side under a microscope. So remember, this is from the carbon-14 sample taken and shown under a microscope. So what was sent to the labs, the carbon dating labs, was a patch job, not pure linen. So the labs actually did a very good job on the material they received. So they received, unfortunately, impure samples. Now, in 2001, the Turin chemist wanted to do a study to actually prove this. So he put together a study with many scientists, and they were able to give you pictures I'm going to show you now. And this was done, let me see, the name of the person was Dr. Ray Rogers. In 2001 to 2005, he did the study, and these are samples of some of his pictures. So he actually shows you the intricacy of the patch job that was done in the medieval period, probably during the heights of the French weaving techniques. And you could see how they could put a thread end to end. So you have a linen thread glued together to the end of a cotton thread. You can see how perfect they were in their abilities. And then slide 29 actually shows you another example of the cotton thread being attached to the linen thread. And of course, cotton is white, so to make it all look yellowy as the old linen did, they had to put dyes on it. So you can see that there was dye put on it, and you can see then as it was a patch job, they did intricate weave. So if here in slide 30, you can see the entire sample and what part was sent to the Arizona lab A2, what part of the cutting was sent to Oxford C14 lab, what part was sent to Zurich, and the next A1 that was also sent to Arizona. So interestingly, if the dates going from left and right are looked at, you can see that above that white line, it's all cotton, and everything below is linen. So it's a mixture of real shroud linen and medieval cotton. But the interesting part is, as you move from left to right, the shroud gets younger and younger and younger. So if the part of the A2 information came back 1238 as a C14 date, it came back 1430 on the A1 area. So you can see then, as you move from left to right, there's more cotton and less linen. So there is also a hint that the data shows modern linen. Now, we get into some of the information on how the image got on the shroud. We knew that we will never understand the energy, how it was formed, because this energy that I'll tell you what our guesses are, had to be so weak it could not burn the shroud. It was also so weak to cause an image on the cloth that it could not penetrate the blood itself. So what kind of energy can't go through a blood clot? It has to be extremely weak. But then again, it had to be perfectly organized to singe or slightly burn the surface of the shroud to leave an image. So this also shows you that the blood had to come onto the shroud first, and the image had to go second. So the image of the man of the shroud is blocked by all the blood. The image only appears where there is no blood stain. So how, again, would that medieval forger know to be so perfect to know that energy penetrates blood? Okay, so we'll go to slide 32, and we're going to tell you now how image is created on something without touching it. So we know now that the image on the shroud had to be created by a form of energy coming out of the body. So during the resurrection, the only thing that makes any sense here to make the cloth have a singe or a burn image is that energy emanated from 360 degrees from the body, but the cloth was only touching the front of the body and the back of the body. The cloth was not touching the sides preeminently. So you can see now strong contact points where the image is darker, where I have the arrows pointing to the nose, chin, the hands, the knee, and the toe. That's where the image is strongest. But most importantly, below the hands and above the hands, there's a gap there of 5 or 6 centimeters of airspace, but there still is an image. That means the image, or whatever mechanics had to happen, the information from the surface of the skin had to reach the shroud and jump 5 to 6 inches. So that cannot happen by gas coming off a decaying body. That would be dissipating in all directions. It had to be coming off in a straight perpendicular line to form a photographic image. So the miraculous thing that really truly had to be miraculous, because there is no scientific explanation to our 21st century mind, the image formed in areas where there was no contact by the body. Only some form of energy could do that. So now we're going to try to explain and bring you up to what we know about the image formation, and this is our explanation on how the image took place. And, of course, I'm going to entertain questions. So we have to deal with some oddities. So remember I said the image has no cheeks, no ears, and the hair is not touching the cheeks. You also have blood in the hair. You also have the appearance of teeth. If you look closely, you think you're looking at teeth. Well, what in heaven's name would give your memory a little tickle there and see, where have I seen teeth like that? That would be in dental x-rays, I think. So the image then has to be explained, and we're going to explain it with our up-to-date explanation on how all these things are possible. So first, for this to be possible, the theory then goes at the highest level of science now that the position of the cloth had to be draped over the body in a pre-image position that you're looking at. And on the left is the head, and on the right are the hands, and folded on top, and the blood trickling down the right arm, and the spear wound with a big, huge group of blood on the right from the chest size. So this cloth is draped pretty tight on that body, but what's also important is that the blood is embedded in the fibers of the shroud. So the bleeding, the wetness, has now sunk into the fibers and formed clots. So the clots and the cloth are one. But the problem is the image of the shroud and the shroud image of blood shows that the clots are not disturbed. So the man on the shroud at the moment of the resurrection could not have just stood up and took the cloth off, or he would have broken those clots and they wouldn't be perfectly formed. So somehow the body had to get out of the shroud without breaking those clots. Also, the image had to be a perfect photograph. Now, in the position of the shroud here, this is wrapping him. This is not a right angle, 180-degree photographic, 90-degree photographic plate. So let me just show you slide number 35. These are a close-up of those clots. These are undisturbed, pristine clots of the wrist and arm. So this then shows that something had to the body to perfectly leave the blood on the shroud with not disturbing it. So the second point then is you have a position one doesn't work to give us the image we have. The tightly wrapped body would have cylindrical distortion. The photographic plate would be curved around the body. You would get a gross image with fat hair and fat cheeks, as you can see on the upper side of slide number 36. But what we really have is the bottom of slide 36, which is a much more human-looking face. So the only way that would happen in the photographic scientific world is that the Shroud of Turin had to somehow become flat. It had to, during the process of resurrection, have a flattened characteristic at the moment the energy came out of the body to have no cylindrical distortion. So you need position 1 for the blood and position 2 for the image. So now we have a theory brought up by Dr. Jackson and on what happened. This is the best theory. This theory is from Dr. Jackson and others. It's called the fall-through hypothesis. So going back to that similar picture, the blue is now sitting on the body of the shroud, the body of the man of the shroud, and during the resurrection phenomena, the body becomes what Dr. Jackson calls mechanically transparent. So the body, from a mechanical standpoint, does not support the cloth against the effects of gravity. And as the body, in a millisecond or so, starts to become no longer a solid body, but some type of energy process, the shroud starts to fall through the body. So let's look at that in detail. So this is an image on slide 38, as if you're looking down at the top of the head of the man of the shroud. In yellow, you can see the shroud curved, touching his nose, and going around the outside of his head. You can see his hair and the cheek and the blood formation. So here the resurrection has not happened, and the shroud is lying on his head and his nose, and you're looking at the top of his head. So at the very bottom is the bottom of the shroud, and the very top is the shroud curved over on the top. So as the resurrection phenomena happens, and the body begins to become mechanically transparent, and the energy begins to radiate from the body, the weight of the shroud begins to fall through the body. So as the image is created, the image is now formed from a shroud, a surface cloth is becoming more straight. And as the energy keeps hitting the shroud and burning this image on it, the shroud keeps falling through the body. And on slide 40, you can see it's already past ears. So by the time the shroud reached the ear level, the reason the ears are missing and the cheeks are missing, by the time the energy going out of the body into the cloth reached that point, the body was running out of atoms. So the atom causing energy, the energy was getting weaker and weaker, and it could not burn the shroud at that point. It had no ability to burn the shroud because the matter was running out. So therefore we have no cheeks and no ears on the Shroud of Turin because the image was created by energy from a disappearing body. So finally, the shroud falls through the body completely disappears from within the shroud. So what does that? Only one thing does that: dematerialization. Dematerialization is not all Star Trek. Atoms do disintegrate. Protons, neutrons, electrons do out of matter in an atomic explosion. So we know how to turn matter into energy, and I'm sure God does too. So in some way that's over our heads, we do not know how the energy was created, but we do know the details of the shroud image formation, what it did to the cloth. And this could not be done by human beings. And the joke of the shroud is, in the circles of the scientists, is it's not such a big miracle if God created the shroud, but it's a huge miracle if a man did. So I am through with my presentation, and I will entertain questions on anything you all have in your audience. And if I'll even refer back to particular slides if you were keeping track on slide numbers. So, John, take over, and I'm available for questions.
Okay, praise God. And I'm just double-checking my meters and equipment and buttons because I'm notorious for talking into muted microphones. Praise God. So, yes, this is powerful. I am blown away by the depth of this research. I did not, and I kind of like it this way. I typically don't read books that guests write before bringing them on. I typically do not listen to their presentations, mostly because I don't have the time, because I work a full-time job, and also do 12 to 15 hours of radio a week. But also because I like to be engaged personally. I think a lot of people do that listen to the program, be engaged as if I am new to it. I want to be new to it. I want to be excited about it as I'm learning it, and I'm blown away because it never. I mean, I kind of sort of felt like when you would see the image, in the linen, the question that would come to anybody who has any sort of a scientific-minded, background is how to get there. Because, under normal circumstances, if you lay any kind of linen over top of a body, it's not going to put an image there, period. Body's going to disintegrate. You know what I mean? There's not going to be. And so when you had analyzed not only the concept of the parts of the linen that was in direct contact making an image, but also parts of the body that were not in contact at all making an image, on top of the fact that you essentially ended up with what could be described in no other way but a negative type of an image in the linen itself. The implication is that the body itself emanated a light energy of some type. And what's really fascinating is when you look at this from a scriptural standpoint, and you understand that our Father God is known as the Father of lights. I believe it's James 1:17. All good gifts and all perfect gifts are from above and come down from the Father of lights. Get our arms around this concept of who we ultimately are when we ascend into the heavens and we become like Jesus. We become essentially light beings in our spirit bodies. As a matter of fact, when you listen to the testimonies of those people who have been taken to heaven, invariably one of the things that is consistent from one person to the next is that there are different levels of what they refer to as glory. For lack of a better term, that's what the Bible uses for the term, and that is the term glory. That term glory is essentially if you will, a magnitude of light emanation that comes from people or entities or whatever, spirit body beings in heaven to different levels of magnitude depending on how much glory they have received ultimately from the Father for various reasons. The understanding is that the apostles have a very high level of glory, that the Father has arguably the greatest, of course, level of glory, so much so that as the Bible says in some places that you cannot even look onto the Father, you would die. Jesse Duplantis, who was taken to heaven, he had to eat special fruit nearby the Crystal River in order to be conditioned in such a way that he was even able to go into the throne room of God. Otherwise, he would be overcome with that light energy, that glory. You've got scriptures like Isaiah 60 verses 1 through 3, which talks about ultimately the transformation of the bride of Jesus Christ during the days that we have in our imminent future, where it says, "Arise, and shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord is risen upon you. For behold, the darkness shall cover the earth, and deep darkness the people, but the Lord will arise over you, and his glory will be seen upon you, and the Gentiles shall come to your light. And that light, that glory light, which to the scientific community would be nothing less than an unquantifiable, misunderstood. We wouldn't be able to, what is that? Nobody understands it. It's just a biblical concept that is accepted by faith and belief in the Bible and the testimony of those who've been taken to heaven. That glory light is essentially what caused the body of Jesus, as it rose and assumed that glory, to ultimately embed or inject that image, that energy image, into the actual linen itself. It's so obvious to those of us who know about glory light and the transformation of us as we move into the heavenly realm as a royal priesthood after we leave this earth. I just sat there with my mouth hanging open, looking at the scientific evidence that basically establishes all the stuff that's written in the Bible about the glory of God. Go ahead.
John, listen, what you're saying is you're not going to believe this, but this is scientifically almost proven word for word what you're saying. So let me give you a little hint that you can look this up, actually. So in 2012, light was shown to be the closest thing possible that was done in an experimental lab by high-level people, physics, that in 2012, Professor Lazzaro in Italy aimed an excimer laser at linen and caused almost exactly the same change in the chemistry of the linen fiber by excimer light. So your whole story is not just what you believe, it's science backing you up. So the beauty of what we live in this 21st century is that science is meeting faith. And everything I told you was a scientific fact. I didn't say one thing that an atheist physicist could argue with me about. I have a different conclusion than the atheist physicist, but I just want you to know your light story, which is beautiful, is now backed up by science. So go right ahead.
Man, that is absolutely powerful. Now, one lady in the chat room has asked, and I know we'll probably have follow-on questions, which I can forward over to you, because the vast majority of the people that listen to the program listen over podcasts at later dates and through YouTube when we, transform it over to YouTube.
Sure.
But excuse me. Anyway, one of the ladies in the chat room had asked, again, if you would repeat where they can go to get the extended presentation.
Right. Okay. So they can hear my presentation by Googling Shroud Phillips, my last name, Shroud Phillips, and there'll be like 5 or 6 choices, and then go to YouTube and do the same thing, Shroud Phillips. Okay, that's where they can find the information. And I would like to put a little plug in here to the audience that if they want me to give a talk in their hometown, I can either, if it's local in Florida, I'll go to it in person, but I do them over WebEx webinars, and they're free, and I'll do it anywhere in the United States as long as somebody has a computer and a projector, and they contact me at my email site, Wayne Shroud, W-A-Y-N-E, Shroud, all one word, at yahoo.com. So please tell the audience that I'm available to speak to any group anywhere. Go ahead, then. What was the lady asking? So just where to go? Okay, she should go to hear me there, but also if she wants more in-depth information, she can go to the #1 website on the Shroud, which is shroud.com. Shroud.com. That's the #1 website for all the scientific, like hundreds and hundreds of papers, thousands of quotes. It's just an amazing site, and that's where I get most of my data from, and where my heroes of the Shroud science world all do their conversations.
Wow, that is so awesome. This is the most in-depth. See, for what it's worth, the whole Tribulation Now ministry has been found a big part of our foundational work, going all the way back to 2011, actually all the way back to 2009, amongst other things, has been to merge science with the Bible. To point out to people that the understanding in Genesis 1 is not as simplistic as some Bible folks want to make it. It's
right.
The earth is much older than 6,000 years. The word day in Genesis 1 is not a 24-hour day. It's known as the word yom in Hebrew, which also refers to the word age, A-G-E, age. And then we don't, we can go into the whole understanding, which is woven into the Hebrew of the gap theory, which is not gap. When you really understand and you study the specialist in this area and the understanding of the Hebrew, you really get your arms around this amazing storyline that doesn't attempt, the Bible doesn't attempt to capture billions of years of the universe's existence. It doesn't. That's not its purpose. It touches upon it. It's woven into the Psalms. It's woven into metaphorical scriptures about these kings of Tyre and the fall of ultimately, essentially Lucifer and all these things. But you see this tapestry that's woven in the form of metaphor. But when you really examine it, what you discover, for example, I don't know if you're aware of this, Doctor, but you may be, but it's just interesting as all get out, is that the man and woman being that are referred to in Genesis 1, I won't say most, but a noteworthy number of the translations in Genesis 1 they imply, and indeed they even state in their text, that the man and woman beings in Genesis 1 had a living soul. That's a capital S soul Hebrew, which implies the Spirit of God in them. That is a mistranslation. Those were added by the translators. I had to go back to the Septuagint and do a multi-hour study on that, digging, and I discovered, I guess I shouldn't be surprised, that the man and woman beings that were referred to in Genesis 1 were not Adam and Eve. They were man and woman creature beings, if you will, that never did have a living soul associated with their existence. And I was like, oh, this explains Neanderthal. This explains Cro-Magnon man. This explains other hominids that existed thousands of years ago that nobody ever tries to map back to the Holy Bible. But and all of these ages and of existence that we try to crush into a 6,000-year experience. And at the end of the day, what we end up doing is we take the science-minded individual and we all and essentially condemn them to hell, because they're going to wave their hand at 6,000-year-old young earth theory, and they're going to see that as absolutely insane, and they're going to walk away from Christianity, and they need to hear the science-minded story behind what's actually in the Bible so they can go, oh, wait a minute, this is more awesome than I could have ever imagined, and they can map the science back to it. And that's what you're doing. That's what excites me about the work that you've done.
Well, I completely agree with everything you just said. Science is much more awesome, and the world is more complicated than 6,000 years, that's for sure. And we have proof for it. So I totally agree with your way of looking at it, and your explanation is very impressive, and I'm going to take it on myself to spread it.
Well, praise God. Yeah, no, it's the most exciting thing ever. Praise Jesus. And my heart breaks because I've always been a science-minded person, but over the years, I'm 54 years old. Sometimes I forget how old I am. That goes to show how old I am. I can't even remember my age. But over all these years, it was weird. It was like, okay, I've turned on my science-minded head, and now I'm going to look at all the science, and I look at all the science. But then when I would be, but I'm a born-again Christian. I love Jesus, so I'd have to turn off my science brain, flip the off switch, and then go over to the Jesus Christian switch. It was like they were mutually exclusive. They could not coexist together. And now we've come to a time, as the Bible implies in Daniel 12, knowledge will increase, where science has now merged, and not only merged, but confirmed. Praise God. Jesus. And your work is the cherry, as I was saying earlier in the show, the cherry on the vanilla on the vanilla cupcake. Praise God. And we're down to just a few more minutes left in the program. And like I said, I'll forward over to you any questions that we get after the show through podcast or whatever.
Great.
Would you be kind enough to close the show with a prayer for us tonight, brother?
Sure. I am just so thankful to God that He has given us His own image in a way that we in the lucky 21st century have the ability scientifically to understand really is the first selfie, a picture taken by God Almighty of Himself. And if this science connection helps us, I just pray that it helps get the message out to the fallen Christians, potential new Christians, just to strengthen our faith and give us more hope to help others. And so thankful that this gift of the proof of His resurrection is such a lucky thing that we can witness now in the 21st century. So, dear Lord, thank you so much for this privilege, and we are going to take it to the longest and best conclusion we can. Amen.